Mr. Hossam Zaki, Assistant Secretary General to the Arab League and former Middle East advisor at the Egyptian government. My friend, Mr. Zaki, welcome, and it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Well, first of all, it's impossible for us not start a conversation today anywhere in the world without observing what's going on in terms of the pandemic. My first question is, how is the Arab League currently looking and evaluating the extent of the pandemic in the region?
Well, yeah, you're right. Now the pandemic is an overarching topic, and everybody is examining the consequences of the pandemic and the lockdowns that happen on every aspect of life. On economic aspects, we have a thorough report that we have issued at the level of the Arab League on the economic impact of the pandemic on our countries. We have to mention that we have a membership of 22 countries. Syria's membership is frozen for the moment, so we are now at 21 active members. And yes, we have a tremendous impact, negative impact on our economies, and the estimations vary to about $1 trillion or a bit less over 21 countries. That's a lot of money, and it's a big impact, and we are trying to see how to bridge the gaps. Our countries are working either nationally or with the international institutions or with the regional institutions in order to see how to minimize the impact of the pandemic on the economies. But the estimate is that it's going to remain with us for at least a year to 2 years if we are to recover from the economic impact of the pandemic.
Yes, and if the pandemic is not enough to create such a major impact, not only in the health but also in the economy, we also face an unprecedented global crisis. How does a global crisis in terms of the oil crisis?
Yes,
how does it match the oil crisis in the region plus the pandemic? How does this scenario forms up?
Well, yes, you put your hand on the other elephant in the room, if you will. This is it's a huge issue, of course, the issue of the oil prices. It is going to impact our donor countries, especially what we call the donor countries, especially in the Gulf region, because the price drop has been so huge. We are talking about an impact of more than half of the revenues that are going to be lost. With the budgets that have been prepared for an average of $50 to $55 a barrel. Now we are talking about 20 to 22, 23, and that is going to remain like this for a foreseeable future. That's a huge loss for all the countries that depend on oil exports for their budgets. It's going to be, and it is going to affect all the countries negatively. So you put both of them together, you have a situation whereby every country needs to be extremely careful how to spend the little money it's going to allocate to itself in the foreseeable future, in the 1 year, 12 to 18 months from today.
Absolutely. When we look, for example, at the situation of Algeria as one single example, for example, 60% of the revenues of Algeria will drop because of the oil prices. Other countries are facing the same situation. How is this potentially affecting the fragile social stability in specific places in the region? Because at the same time that the coronavirus forces individuals to remain quarantined, once the virus poses no longer a threat, could we see a sudden explosion of social unrest in specific places of the region?
Listen, this is a very sensitive point, because, as you know, the region has been in turmoil throughout most of the past decade. In 2011, we had popular protests in the streets of many countries, Tunisia, Egypt, Syria, Libya, Yemen, and so on. Three of them, until now, are in deep, deep turmoil. Syria, Libya, and Yemen. 10 years later, Egypt has been successful in getting out of it, and Tunisia has been successful in getting out of it. So the previous experience is harsh, and we always say that the countries need to be very careful not to let the popular demands be ignored in any way that would cause further harm to the stability of the country and the political structure of the country. We have had popular protests in Iraq and Lebanon that started in October last year. It has been the cause of some unrest, but the political system here and there has been resisting any change. But far from being resolved in both countries, there might be further escalation in the foreseeable future. Now, the situation that you mentioned about any country that has a serious drop in its oil revenues, and hence its revenues in general, because the oil revenues are the bulk of the revenues in any case. That is a major factor that needs to be taken into consideration. I think governments are now seeing the potential risks of such an economic downturn and the fallout of the COVID pandemic on the stability of our societies. We need to be very careful. I think governments have been trying to compare notes and to compare experiences, bilaterally at least, in order to see whether there are lessons learned in any case, in any specific country, that could be useful for any other country.
Excellent. You mentioned Libya a little bit earlier in your response, and the Arab League has made some very harsh criticisms towards the Turkish intervention in both Libya and Syria. Do you foresee them trying to occupy a vacuum of influence or power in the region if, with the drops and the harsh drops in the price of oil, pushes the US and Russia, at least temporarily, outside of the region in terms of their interest. And this could open space for Turkey to be more, to attempt to be more present or to influence more in conflicts that we haven't seen and in situations that we haven't seen their participation before, such as Libya and Syria.
Yes, unfortunately, Turkey has been a, a good neighbor for several decades now, after the Turkish Empire has blown up in the beginning of the 20th century. They have been, rather on the good side of neighborliness with the Arab countries. But unfortunately, the policies that are followed by the government of Turkey, let us say throughout the past decade, it is clear that it has been favoring a course of action based on a certain ideological platform, meaning that they are more inclined to support, to deal with, to engage with what we call movements or currents of political Islam. And on the other hand, they are less friendly and less and more overtly adversarial with those countries that do not encourage this brand of political action. So the result is wherever you see those movements, you see Turkey as a fundamental support for them. And wherever you see action against those movements, you see Turkey as a potential enemy of what is happening. That is too bad, because the Arab world now, and for some time, has been trying to grapple with the ideas of political Islam, its place in society, whether it has a place in society or not, whether it has a place in the political system or not, how to deal with them. Those are big, big questions in the Arab world, big questions. They are not resolved 100% in all the countries. So in some countries, you see that some of our members have movements that are rooted in political Islam. In some other countries, those are totally banned. So there is no one size to fit everybody. And the Turkish government, when it lends its support, political, sometimes military, sometimes financial, it really upsets some very delicate balances in the region that without the Turkish support could have found themselves to be much more stable. But with the Turkish intervention, with this platform, it really makes the situation much more fragile, often much less stable than what we would like to see. The situations in Syria and in Libya are totally different. For instance, they In Syria, they claim to be against the government in Damascus. In Libya, they say we are in favor of the government in Tripoli. So what is consistent here? Are you with the governments or against the governments? The answer always finds itself in the explanation that I just gave you. It's a matter of political ideology, and political Islam is a major component of this situation.
No, it is a very complex situation, particularly with this dual vision from Turkey in relation to Syria and to Libya. We also have several other similar situations throughout the region. For example, when we look at the conflict in Yemen, how does the League look at the conflict in Yemen, which was already deadly, which was already extremely negative against the society, and also with the potential spread, further spread of the COVID in that particular country. Um, but at the same time, when we look at Yemen, we have heard, particularly here in the United States and in Europe as well, about the indirect conflict between Saudi Arabia and Iran within Yemen. How does the Arab League sees that? How is the dynamic playing within this new environment that is shaping up in the region?
Listen, for the Arab League, the Yemen situation is much more clear than for other organizations. Both Yemen and Saudi Arabia are members of the Arab League. So how do we view it? We view it in a simple way. The Houthis took over government when they were not supposed to do that. So that is a coup that they mounted against the legitimate government. What the Saudis and what is called the Arab coalition, were trying to achieve was to reinstate the government, the legitimate government, in Sana'a, the capital of Yemen. This is how the current war started. The Houthis took over the capital. They dismantled the government. Mm-hmm. They dismissed it, fired everybody. So the government went to neighboring Saudi Arabia, said, listen, this is the situation that we have encountered. And those Houthis are, of course, supported by Iran. So very fragile situation, very delicate. Should Iran be left and its proxy, its surrogates in Yemen, the Houthis, should they be left to take over the whole country? Or should they be checked? Yeah. The answer was on the Saudi part and the UAE, the Arab Emirates, they should be checked. Now, that is how things have started. Now, how things have developed, it went into a long way because Yemen is also a quagmire. It has so many problems going on, so many different political affiliations and players and so on. It has so many, how can I say, branches in international terrorism. So it's a very difficult situation there. Add to this the COVID pandemic now, you can imagine the nightmare that the average Yemeni person is living in Yemen at the moment. But we have been thrilled to hear and to know about the announcement of the Saudi Arabia and the coalition, the suspension of their military operations and the ceasefire that they have announced, because we think that this is a gesture of goodwill, and it can only be met with goodwill if the other side, backed by Iran, does not see that this is a goodwill gesture that needs to be met accordingly, then we would be losing a very valuable opportunity to stop the war for good. Now, we have many indications that the Houthis don't have a unified opinion on that, that the Iranians, some of them are saying, let us continue to harass the Saudis. But we think, we hope at least, that reason will prevail. Such a war, if it continues, it will be solely blamed on the Houthis, because the Saudi Arabia and the coalition was very clear. They do not want to continue this war. They want to have this humanitarian ceasefire and a ceasefire in order to preserve the Yemeni population from further problems and atrocities. So it is clear that they are now reaching the end of the war. We hope that the Houthis are going to engage positively through the United Nations mediation, if possible.
Well, early in this response, and we understand, of course, from a distance, of the Iranian participation in the conflict through the Houthis, and it leads us to ask and to wonder about the similar Iranian approach in Iraq, and how does the Arab League perceives the attempt of expansion of influence of the Iranians through proxies or in direct manners inside Iraq, and given the total unstable environment in Iraq, plus also the strong drop in the revenues because of the oil, and the difficulty that the United States have in trying to create a solid, organized environment in the country, how does this play out in this dynamic and the presence of Iran in Iraq?
Listen, because I'm an official and I have an official position, and this official position sometimes puts restrictions on my answers. My answer on this important but sensitive question is the following. We always call on all external players to take a distance away from Iraq and leave Iraq to the Iraqis, and not to engage in any hegemonial movement in order to try to control anything inside Iraq. Anything, any entity, any political entity, any players, anything. It is clear that in the past years, Iraq has been paying a heavy price from its sovereignty because of the intervention of outside players. It is also clear that the Iraqis, in their majority, and I guess the popular protests in Iraq have shown this, do not at all want any type of foreign influence on their government, be it American or Iranian, but in particular Iranian, because they have come out in the streets and chanted in favor of pushing Iran out of Iraq. It's a very known fact, so I'm not, breaking any secrets. So the idea here is it's a challenge for the Iraqis before anybody else. It's a challenge for them how to preserve, how to restore their national sovereignty and independence. I think it is clear that the Iraqi political class is more and more aware of this problem and wants to deal with it once and for all. But they always say, and I certainly believe what they always say that Iraq and Iran share a border of more than 1,000 kilometers. So inevitably, there will be, and they have common heritage, common things, heritage, faith in some cases, and so on. Maybe marriages, mixed marriages, and so on. But that doesn't mean that one country should be influential in the other country because of the common border. The political class in Iraq nowadays, different than the political class that used to exist 10, 15 years ago. But now they are very careful about this problem. And they know that it is impossible to let anybody, a neighbor, a superpower, anybody, make use or abuse of their situation, of their political system, in order to put their hands on the political decision in the country. They are very aware of that. In my view, it is a matter of time before the Iraqis cleanse their system completely from all the outside interference. They are fiercely independent, the Iraqis. But of course, the aftermath of 2003 and the American invasion and the Iranian interventions and so on, the aftermath is difficult. And the legacy is heavy, very heavy to deal with. So it will take time.
Yeah, absolutely. And given the American presence in Iraq and how this generates some social negative responses in Iraq towards the United States, and also this is being seen as a gateway, as an opportunity for the Iranians to try to stir even more against the United States. And at the same time, the US presented a plan for the Israeli-Palestinian, a draft plan for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in which the Arab League was not very fond of. When we look at those two particular situations, how does the Arab League and the United States interact and see each other right now, particularly how the Arab League looks at the United States and its presence in the region?
Good question. Thank you. Listen, we have always maintained that the United States is because it is a superpower, and it has a traditional role in the Middle East, that we are not against this role in principle. We're not against this role. But we always say that we need to see a more fair, a more balanced American intervention in the conflicts of the region, in particular the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. You mentioned the US vision that was presented. The US vision, there was a ministerial meeting dedicated to that issue. And it issued a decision that rejected the vision, not out of the blues, but because of specific elements. Why? Because this vision is a biased vision, a vision that is not based and rooted in international law, a vision that is made by people who value real estate rather than valuing the rights of peoples for self-determination. Some of those concepts cannot just be thrown away or put under the rug. Those are very, very important concepts upon which countries like the United States itself has been declared. The United States has been declared because of the right of its people for independence. That's an inalienable right. The Palestinians have the same right. They should enjoy the same right. So what we are saying is that if the United States wants to play a role in this particular conflict, it should demonstrate even-handedness, not bias. It should demonstrate a respect for international law, not a complete disrespect for international law and the United Nations institution and its decisions. This is unacceptable. It should demonstrate respect for the Palestinians. The United States administration has not been demonstrating that, unfortunately. The team that has been playing with this issue and that has presented this vision has not been very understanding of the Palestinian fears, wishes, hopes, ambitions, dreams. Nothing to compare with their complete understanding and complete obedience with the tiniest of Israeli wishes. So even-handedness is lost. When you are a mediator in a conflict and you lose your even-handedness, you lose the respect of at least one party, and you lose your ability to convince both that what you're putting on the table is a viable solution. Because they would think, no, it's not a viable solution. You are biased, so we cannot really take it from you.
Ambassador, as a continuation of this question, what would you see as a necessary first step that the United States must do in this current situation, in this current environment? Obviously, not already, we can't expect a complete shift of behavior of the United States in relation to what they drafted or what their idea was in relation of the conflict. But in order to pave a way towards something that is more unbiased, as you mentioned, what would be the necessary first step that the United States will have to present right now in order to reestablish a channel of trust and communication in order to reach some sort of mediated agreement?
You know, that's an important question, but it really should be posed to the Americans. But I can tell you, for one thing, we are hearing now talk about the intention of the Israeli government, potential government, potential Prime Minister, Mr. Netanyahu, and the other candidate, to annex some of the occupied Palestinian territory to Israel. We believe clearly that this is a null and void decision, no matter what, because decisions and actions taken by the occupying power on the occupied territory by law, international law, are null and void. Clear. But Israel doesn't care about international law. Who used to care about international law was the United States. If the United States wants to begin to attempt to look less biased, not even-handed, less biased, it should prohibit the Israelis from taking any such action. Not because it will have a legal consequence, but because it means that it will show that the Americans still have little respect for international law, for the aspirations of the Palestinians, their ambition, their dream to have an independent state like everybody else does. If they are to take such a decision, if they are to say the vision that we have presented is nothing but our vision, it is non-binding to any of the two sides, maybe then we will be able to see that the American side is back on the track of being a mediator, an acceptable mediator. We have heard from Mr. Biden, the Democratic nominee for the presidency, that he's not going to backtrack on the administration's decision to move the embassy to Jerusalem. To which we said, okay, if you do not want to backtrack on a decision to move the American embassy to West Jerusalem, that's fine. Accept that there will be an American embassy in East Jerusalem accredited to the new state of Palestine. If you accept that, then there will be even-handedness. Then there will be a mediator that can call itself an unbiased mediator that is capable of reaching solutions to the very difficult questions that lay ahead. But if short of that, don't call yourself a mediator, your mediation is not going to work. Your bias is clear to everybody, and you have only damaged the stability and peace in the region in ways that will come about in several years' time.
Yeah, so it would require a complete shift in mindset in order to pave a way to match some of the expectations in the region.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely.
Ambassador, it's impossible today to talk about the United States, independent of the region that we're focusing this conversation, without mentioning China. The relationship between China and the Middle East over the past years have been heavily centered in the commercial links and the heavy acquisition of oil from China to from several of the regional countries. How does the League and the region observes this dynamic of this relationship with a world that has an excess surplus of oil, at least for the next couple of years, until it stabilizes back again. How is China a partner, or is it a temporarily partner in the region?
No, it's a partner, and it's, I have to add, a reliable partner. Reliable is a very important word in international relations in general, and for the Middle Easterns in particular. Uh, China has launched an initiative called the Belt and Road Initiative. That's a worldwide initiative, really, almost worldwide, for 3 continents. It's huge. It's an initiative that would require, I think, the spending of $600 billion in infrastructure over a period of 10 years. It is huge. I give you one example. In an average meeting of the Arab League ministers of foreign affairs, out of the 21 current member states, we have a presence of about 13 to 14. Depends on who's present. We have about a presence of about 14, sometimes 15 or 16, but that's really the maximum. In the last forum, ministerial forum between the Arab states and China, was held in China. The next one is going to be held in Jordan. But the last one, 20 out of the 21 countries had foreign ministers represented in Beijing. And the remaining one, I think, was taken ill, so he couldn't, at the last moment, so he couldn't come. So we were going to have 21 out of 21. All the foreign ministers were there. This means, and it shows, that the relationship with China is viewed by the Arabs as being something strategic. There is nothing temporary there. They understand it, we understand it. It is clear that this partnership that we have with the Chinese is a long-term partnership. The Chinese care about the Arab countries. They understand the Arab positions. They understand the Palestinian aspirations. They support them. And the Chinese are not an enemy of Israel. They, on the contrary, they have good relations with Israel. But they never moved their embassy to Jerusalem. They never taken any step that would upset the very delicate balance, the political delicate balance. So I think they are conducting themselves in a fair way, and they have been good friends, as I said, for the Arab countries, and we value the partnership with China very highly.
Very interesting. And it's yet for us to observe if China will have some sort of appetite in the upcoming years as the confidence grows in order to give more political opinions in the region, while right now we don't see them doing that yet.
It's very possible.
Very possible. Moving slightly from China, I want now to bring Russia to the question. Right in the beginning of the COVID pandemic that was growing the world, we had a very intense, I wouldn't say confrontation, but I would say dialogue between Saudi Arabia and Russia in regarding to oil prices. How did that dynamic played out? Was it a miscalculated dialogue or situation amidst the pandemic that was at that time yet to spread even more to the region? How does that play in the region? And as a consequence of that, the perception of the League towards the Russians?
Oh, there are two aspects here. The bilateral aspect, the Russian-Saudi relationship. This I can't really talk about, but I know, I can tell you that we have heard from Saudi officials statements that value the partnership and good relations with Russia. So it's not for lack of political will. They have good political will versus Russia. They want to cooperate with the Russians. Of course, Russia is a player on the oil scene as much as on the physical scene in the Middle East. In Syria, Libya, elsewhere, they have influence. Now, I want to focus on the Russian Arab. The Russian Arab is a good, we have a good dynamic going on. We have a forum for cooperation that also meets regularly at the level of foreign ministers. But the Russians are not China. China is opening up very big on the Arab scene, spending a lot of money, winning more and more friends. Russia is not in this situation. It's not doing this at all. Russia is more of a reservoir for technical knowledge, for technical expertise, sometimes for arms and munitions and so on. True, they can provide that, and they have no problem providing this. And I'm sure on our side, many will queue up to make use of the Russians' expertise in these things. But this being said, Russia as a former superpower and a current big power knows very well that in the Middle East there are some things that you shouldn't really, some red lines that you shouldn't really cross. For instance, the question of Palestine. They never crossed the red line. They maintain relations with the Israelis, fine. But they support the Palestinian rights. Very clear, very clear. And they are the ones who proposed from the beginning, why not have two embassies in West and East Jerusalem, one for Israel, one for Palestine. So they are pragmatic and they think in terms of how to maximize our relations with the Arabs because of historical backgrounds. And on the other hand, they do not lose the Israelis, and they never lose anybody. They keep talking to everybody, either in this context or any other context. So my short answer, I guess, would be the situation with the Russians is not ambiguous. It's clear in many sense of the word, especially when it comes to the Palestinian question. You will find difficulties of some Arab countries with Russia because of its role in Syria or Libya or elsewhere, but that in general, they are capable and we are capable of having a respectable dialogue, a respectable exchange of views, and try to reach compromises where there is none.
Ambassador, we're approaching the end. I have two very quick yet highly complicated questions. So,
I will try to answer. I will try to answer.
The first one is linked with this dynamic uh, of the oil prices again. With this unprecedented drop in the demand of the barrel, how will how will some countries of the region cope with the lack of revenue? Are there any debates or ideas in order how to substitute revenue or to engage in different strategic plans?
Unfortunately, what we have been witnessing and the studies that we have show that in majority of the cases, let us say, in a majority of the cases, uh, the countries will have to resort to the international and regional uh, funding entities like the IMF or any other bank that could provide for uh, financial support, economic support, uh, just to let this crisis pass by. It's going to be very costly, as we said. It's going to take a long time to redress, but that's the only way. When I say the majority of the countries, I think that some countries who have a financial cushion that can be useful in such times will probably be compelled to use this cushion in order to be able to move forward, or else the cost of unemployment, of shutting down a number of the uh, factories and businesses and so on, is going to take a very difficult toll on our economies.
Thank you, Ambassador. And my last question, which is a question that I could not leave without asking, how do you perceive? How does the league perceive? What's your sense in the region of the perception of the image of Brazil at the moment?
This issue is particularly dear to me, as you know, because I've lived in Brazil and I love your country, and I really think very, very highly of Brazil and the Brazilians in general. Now, you have witnessed a change of government, and the elections have resulted in a situation where the current administration is not very much friendly to the Palestinians. And the Palestinians, as you know, for us is a central cause. What Brazil has tried to achieve in the past year and a half has been very, very delicate, following the footsteps of the United States almost blindly. That is something that we have viewed very negatively. Brazil in general, in the Arab world, is viewed very favorably. Not, of course, because of football, because everybody knows that, but because it has this image of a law-abiding country, internationally, a country that has made some clear successes, yet it has some still roots in the developing world and the third world because of its nature and the difficult nature of the Brazilian society in general and the makeup of the population in general. So our wish is for Brazil to go back to what we have always seen, have good relations with the Arab world, have understanding and support for the Palestinian aspirations because they are legitimate, because they are true, they are supported by the whole world. So it would be heartbreaking for someone like myself. I don't have to talk about anybody else. Myself, it is heartbreaking to see that Brazil would vote in favor of a resolution that goes contrary to Palestinian aspirations, or against a resolution that would help the Palestinians make their aspirations for freedom and independence come true. It really breaks my heart, and I wish that as soon as possible, Brazil goes back to this to its usual place in the community of nations.
Oh, thank you very much, my friend. It has been a pleasure. I miss our conversations back in Brasilia.
Absolutely.
As soon as all of this is over, I will definitely stop by Cairo for us to have lunch and dinner together.
Please do. That would be a great pleasure to receive you here. Thank you for this session. I hope it was useful. And I think we can do it again sometime down the road. Let's stay in touch. Good luck for you. Good luck to Brazil. And best of luck to you. Have a great day.
Thank you very much, my friend, and
Thank
the
you.
best.
Thank you.